Hi, welcome to Living Legacy, episode 4. I'm Penny Dell, longtime member of the National Association of Women Artists and president from 2005 to 2007 and still on the board. Next up in our Legacy series is Gail Levin, a crusader for women artists with major books on Lee Krasner and Judy Chicago and many others, as well as being the scholar who did the Whitney exhibition and the catalog raisonné on Edward Hopper. I mentioned Gail in our first episode of Living Legacy as the scholar who studied the career of NAWA's Teresa Bernstein, with an exhibit and an accompanying book, which included work by her graduate students evaluating different aspects of Teresa's works and life. So the National Gallery of Art has acquired 2 works, and Gail had a part in that. Our catalogs at NAWA reflect that Teresa joined NAWA in 1916 and won many prizes through the years. Episode 4 is Gail Levin on the life and work of Teresa Bernstein. And now we can look at her picture. And here she is with Joan Semmel, who Gail was kind enough to get as a speaker for a 2019 luncheon at the National Arts Club. There are many, many mentions of Teresa Bernstein in our catalogs, and her record is substantial. Next slide, please. This is a wonderful picture of her piece on the armistice, and Gail will be giving you lots of in-depth artwork, and this shows you the quality and the scope and the ambition of Teresa Bernstein's work. And this shows you why her reputation needed to be shown and expanded. And Gail is the crusader who has done that. Next slide, please. Here is one of the black and white pictures of Teresa's work that won an award in 1994, Art and Flowers. I'm sorry to say that our catalogs were all printed in black and white until 2002. But it gives you an idea of some of the things that she did. Okay, here's another mention of Teresa in our catalog, and it basically reminds us that she joined in 1919. Next slide, please. When her beloved husband, William Meyerowitz, died, Teresa decided to create an award in his name, and in his honor made the award for his favorite themes, which were American themes. Here is one of the people that won this award, Merrill French's July in the 80s. And Merrill French got the William Meyerowitz Memorial Award. Next slide, please. Here is another William Meyerowitz Memorial Award that went to Jeanette Durham for Waterfall. Next slide, please. Here is another mention of Teresa in our catalogs, listing also her address, which I outlined in red, and which you'll hear from Gail. She has visited and actually enjoyed being in that apartment. Next slide, please. Here is the sad mention in our catalogs of Teresa's passing. So, you know, there are many more entries that reflect Teresa's membership in NAWA, but the real treat is ahead. As I said, you know, I mentioned Gail, you know, in our first episode, and here she is with Joan Semmel at our 2019 luncheon at the National Arts Club, where Joan Semmel gave a wonderful, wonderful talk on her prodigious career. Next slide, please. Here is Gail being honored at our 2007 gala at the Rubin Museum. And also, she gave a wonderful speech, and we were celebrating the publication of her book, Becoming Judy Chicago. Next slide, please. Gail is an incredible collage artist, and she always adds autobiographical elements. And we had a wonderful exhibit of her collages at our Fifth Avenue Gallery in 14th Street. And here is the greeting on her postcard. Next slide, please. Here are all the details, of the exhibition, which took place in 2014. And we had a wonderful reception. And the next slide shows you some of the guests at that reception. Next slide, please. Here's Gail. And I believe that is some of her graduate students holding the Teresa Bernstein book in the NAWA Gallery. You're going to be exploring that book in depth with Gail coming up ahead. But I just wanted you to see one more thing. And, that is that it gives me great pleasure to tell you that this amazing feminist, historian, scholar, and I are longtime friends and count as a highlight of our youths, our time hitchhiking together through France, Switzerland, and Germany after the student riots ended our classes at the Sorbonne in 1968. I can assure you that you're in for a great treat. Here's Gail.
Penny, thank you so much. Who would have thought back in 1968, hitchhiking across Europe, that we would ever be here today talking about my friend and a champion of the National Association of Women Artists, Teresa Bernstein. And I noticed in the catalog you showed that it had a mistake. And Teresa's the author of that mistake. She lied about her age. So you had her born in 1896, but she was in fact born in 1890. So when she joined NAWA in 1916, she was in fact 26, not 20, or whatever. And I remember meeting Teresa in 1985. She was 95. And when a dealer gave her a show for her 100th birthday and sent out postcards, Teresa crossed out the 100th birthday. She didn't want anyone to know. And of course, she lived into 2002 and died just 2 weeks short of her 112th birthday. And Teresa made that black and white picture of flowers that you showed. I think she was 105 when she made it. And
wow.
She was still making art at 110. But I think some of her best work, and I don't want to seem ageist, was at the beginning of her career. She was quite precocious. Anyway, we have, to begin with, two self-portraits, one in a rather classic realist style and one in a more modernist style. And what happened between them is probably that she digested the lessons of the 1913 New York Armory show. But we'll get to that. So I would thank you for mentioning the big Teresa Bernstein project, Teresa Bernstein, A Century in Art, which is the name of the book that I edited with my large biographical essay, the work of two other scholars, Tish Burnham and Michelle Cohen. The latter is the curator of the Architect of the Capitol today. She's got her hands full, I imagine. And 5 of my graduate students. And those were wonderful essays that they put together. So I was very happy to see this book has a life beyond the exhibition, but the exhibition itself traveled to museums up and down the East Coast, down as far as the Boca Raton Museum in Florida, and up to Cape Ann in Massachusetts, which is where Teresa, seen here with her cat, spent her summers really since she was a member of NOAA. She was already going to Gloucester on Cape Ann, which is a kind of fisherman's colony in history. So I first met Teresa Bernstein when I read that she was having a show at the New York Historical Society. I believe it was 1985. So that would mean she was 95. And I was working on my biography of Edward Hopper, and I knew very well that in Walter Tittle, another artist's diary, he mentioned hanging the show at the McDowell Club with Edward Hopper and Teresa Bernstein. Well, Hopper had died in 1967, and this was 1985, and lo, I thought, wow, she's alive. I immediately got in touch with her, and I was very impressed with this 95-year-old woman. But I remember thinking I didn't want to get to know her, didn't want to become too close to her because I thought she might perish at any moment. Little did I know that Teresa did yoga, and she certainly had tenacity and resilience, and even suffering the loss of her husband, who died at age 93, was a few years older than Teresa, and they were very close. She just kept on going and kept making sure that his work got exhibited too. It was a real love match. This photograph of myself with Teresa is when I visited her in July 1991 at her summer home. And by then she was a widow. And the photograph is taken by my husband, John Van Sickle. Teresa was not only an artist, a visual artist and a painter, but she also wrote. And there are articles and catalog notes from her earliest days. But her first book was typically about her late husband, called William Meyerowitz, The Artist Speaks. And it came out in 1986, the year after I met Teresa. I bought all of her books, and she would send me a lot of publicity about them, which I've saved and will be in my papers at Rutgers, if they're not already there. So she went on to publish quite a few more books, one for children called Rabbitville. Her journals were published in 1992. And you can see all of these on the website, Teresa Bernstein, A Century in Art, which I directed, or I was the advisor for, and it was completely created by Elsie Young, then my graduate student, now Dr. Elsie Young, art historian. Okay. And Penny, thank you for mentioning my role in arranging for two of Teresa's very best paintings to be given to the National Gallery in Washington as part of their permanent collection. This took place in 2018. And the paintings are on their website, but they were the gift of Edith Stein in honor of her late husband, Martin Stein, who was certainly Teresa's most passionate collector ever. And Mrs. Stein has been an incredibly loyal supporter of Teresa. And I know that Teresa is so thrilled, if she's looking down from heaven, I have to believe she is, to have these paintings in the National Gallery. The one we're looking at, The Readers, shows in the center, holding the black book, her father posed for that. And he was, of course, an immigrant from Poland, a Jewish immigrant from Poland. And the New York Public Library has always been a haven for immigrants and everybody else with a quest for knowledge. So I think it's one of the great paintings of the New York Public Library. And the other painting, which the Steins gave to the National Gallery, is a very different group painting again, because Teresa loved to paint groups of people and crowds, as you showed in that World War I painting as well, earlier, Penny. But Polish Church Easter morning, I'll show you later how Teresa, a Jewish girl, got to go to the Polish church Easter morning. And of course, she has the name of a Catholic saint, Saint Teresa. She has Sephardic Jewish roots. Giving a Jewish child the name Teresa was somewhat protective. In any event, the congregants were annoyed that Teresa took out an envelope from her purse and made little tiny sketches to remember how this looked for her later painting. But I think she really captured the crowd, which she was so skilled at. And then it's interesting that the Art Institute of Chicago saw my book and got to see the paintings at the National Gallery before they were even exhibited, and rushed to buy this other wonderful painting from my show, which came on the market. And it's called The Milliners. And it reminds me of Degas' depiction of milliners, but it's incredibly original and really depicts the people posing were Teresa's sisters-in-law. And she was an only child, but William, whom she married, William Meyerowitz, had lots of sisters. And this was a typical occupation for Jewish immigrants, to work on piece goods at home, especially the decoration of millinery, of hats, which were what the fashionable woman couldn't go out without in those days. So I'm very pleased. I was very pleased when the curator from the Art Institute of Chicago wrote to really let me know and boast that they had acquired this major Bernstein painting. So very happy about that. And then I would like to go to another painting that was in my show and is in my book, or the book, it's not just my book. And it's called The Immigrants, and it's from 1923. And I wanted to start with it because Teresa, who I see lied about her age to Nawa, also lied about her birthplace. And she listed her birthplace as Philadelphia, but we know for sure that she came as a 1-year-old, a toddler, with her immigrant parents, and she was born in Krakow, in what is today Poland, but may have been the Austro-Hungarian Empire at that time. And Teresa's depiction of the mother and child in the foreground certainly reminds us of her admiration for really Renaissance portraiture, and of her ability. We see here Teresa's love of painting a crowd, and we see also her empathy for immigrants, for the downtrodden. We see a lot of things. And this is Krakow, where Teresa returned several times, twice at least, with her mother, and to visit her grandfather lived there, as you'll see. And she went in 1922 and made these brief sketches. In 1922, she was there with her husband, William. And let's go back, though, and see Teresa photographed in America at age 1.5, and portrait of her elegantly dressed mother, Anna Ferber Bernstein, and Isidore Bernstein, her father. And he was in all kinds of manufacturing, and he was a successful businessman in America until his business finally went under, and the business was in Philadelphia. So Teresa grew up middle class, and you can see they sent her to a private kindergarten in a Catholic church, the Church of the Covenant. and her nickname was Tessa Bernstein. And so there she is as a little girl with a parasol, which you might have noticed her mother held a parasol. So this is part of the accoutrements of a fashionable woman or girl at that time. And you can see that the parents paid, wow, 75 cents for 4 weeks tuition. That must be $75. I don't know. There's been a lot of inflation. Not sure about that. And then, oh, there's the better view. And you can see Teresa was always adorable. Even at age 14, sometimes an awkward age, Teresa's so elegant in her Victorian dress, style dress and hairdo. And she went to public school in Philadelphia. She did very well. And then she did so well that she got a scholarship to the Philadelphia School of Design for Women. Today, it's known as Moore College of Art. And this is Mark's, and I thought the NAWA audience would be really interested in this because it shows Teresa, Miss Bernstein, winning a prize, a $10 prize for her oil paintings. And this, I believe, is the first award for art that Teresa ever got. At least it's the first published award. And there you see Teresa in the center behind her teacher where the arrow is at the Philadelphia School of Design for Women in 1911, her last year there, with her teacher, Elliot Dangerfield. And Dangerfield was quite an impressive teacher. When she graduated, we'll come back to him in a minute, her mother took her off for at least her second documented trip back to Poland and to Europe, where they visited two citadels of modern art, Berlin and Munich, Germany. And Teresa got to see paintings by Munch, Franz Marc, and Vasily Kandinsky. And she was really launched as a figurative painter of a modernist sensibility, I would say. And as her career moves forward, she becomes less realistic, less controlled, and more expressionist. So when they got back from this relatively short trip to Europe, Teresa went down for the rest of the summer to North Carolina to the summer program at Blowing Rock, led by her teacher from Philadelphia, Elliot Dangerfield. And she painted an African-American dance hall in Blowing Rock, which was a pretty audacious thing to do, and the music must have called to her. This is the kind of music she would have heard that is so evoked in her painting. So sort of Scott Joplin-esque. But we'll move ahead. Because Teresa moved on, her father's business failed. They moved to New York City, and the family, and Teresa lived with her parents, and she enrolled for the last classes of William Merritt Chase at the Art Students League in 1911. And you can see that she was, the women's life classes were all women. But she also took, we think, still life as well. And because she painted on the upper left here in 1911, a very Chase-like still life. I'm comparing her dead bird to his fish and skate still life on the bottom of the screen. And she really admired his elegant manner, his dapper dress. She also appreciated or learned to appreciate, he would often praise James McNeill Whistler. And Teresa has gotten in this still life in 1913, really Whistler's tonality, just about perfect. She's really emulating that. And that's the year Teresa got to visit, but was not in, the New York Armory Show the official name for which was the International Exhibition of Modern Art, and was organized by an American domestic committee to feature European modernists, but they also had some American artists. So Edward Hopper sold his first oil painting in this show, a picture of sailing. But Teresa, who was then just 22 or 23, was not invited into the show. Hopper was a good 8 years older than Teresa Bernstein, even though they were showing together. And at this time, really her reputation as a painter was bigger than Hopper's, I would say. So this is the moment when we have Van Gogh, but Matisse, one Kandinsky, which Alfred Stieglitz purchased. And Teresa's also always engaging with whatever's going on around her, what's new, whether it's the politics of women's suffrage or open air movies, which were new. And she did a painting, and I'm showing you a dreary black and white, all we have of that painting, the open air show. But then she made later reversed the image in an etching, which I'm showing you on the right. The same image. And the painting was bought by John Lane, in an important publisher and collector in London. And I think it may be floating around England. It may turn up someday. I certainly would love to see it. So I hope it survived the blast of World War II, for example. We don't know. And here you see a photograph of Teresa with her palette at her easel with another still life in 1914. Just the fact that she had these photographs of herself with her paintings taken in her studio shows her ambition, I think. She's even holding a paintbrush here. And here, Teresa always loved music. So it's not surprising that she married someone in William Meyerowitz, who was actually the son of a cantor and Meyerowitz sang not only in synagogues, but also in churches. His voice was so special. But even before they met, Teresa's hanging out, hearing the Polish pianist Paderewski at Carnegie Hall in 1914. And you can see her painting from an upper balcony looking down. This is a large canvas, which is today in the collection of the Boca Raton Museum, another gift of Edith and Martin Stein. And we've already discussed the readers, which falls here in her chronology, and I think is one of her great pictures. So happy it's at the National Gallery. And this was a great year for Teresa. She is one of the very few painters ever to have depicted a suffrage meeting. And of course, these meetings to campaign for women's right to vote in America took place out of doors. They could attract bigger crowds. And the woman silhouetted, the speaker, is of course standing on the proverbial soapbox. And Teresa catches the night lights, which were still electric lights, new at that time in New York. And so she's so attuned to the physical and emotional and social and political context in which she's painting. In that sense, she's such a remarkable painter, so different than Edward Hopper, who, and to the largest extent, ignored crowds, ignored what was going on, and doubles down and paints his wife posing in his studio as different people, and mostly painted solitary figures or couples. But Teresa is not at all intimidated by the crowd, or whether she's in a service at a Polish church, sketching, or witnessing a suffrage meeting at night. And there you see another one of her posed pictures, because the photography took a long time at this time, and another lost painting. We know its title, Midnight Masquerade, and maybe it will turn up too, from 1915. And I love her smock and the way she looks out as she holds her brush and palette. She takes herself very seriously as an artist. And this is her response to World War I. The United States had not yet joined the war, but remember, she has relatives in Poland, and she's concerned about them, and Germany and France are fighting, and Russia. Anyway, they're paying close attention. There are searchlights on the Hudson, so there are already aspects of war preparation. And in Times Square, you could stand and read the war news, which is what she's painted here on the upper right. And there we see the painting again, and a photograph of the New York Times billboard at the time. So there were no flashing neon signs or digital readouts, but there were illuminated billboards to read the newspaper or the news from the newspaper at night, posted out of doors. And so that's what, and look at the little girl. It reminds me of the small figure of a girl in Rembrandt's The Night Watch. And I'm sure Teresa must have been thinking about that in painting a nighttime scene, because that famous painting was believed to depict a nighttime scene at the time. Searchlights on the Hudson. And I think I would pause here for a moment and tell how I happened to write this book on Teresa, because I told her when I knew her that there should be a book on her, but I never said I was going to write it. However, in an interview, a long interview she did for the Jewish Division at the New York Public Library, she speaks of me, which at first was transcribed as not Gail Levin, but Gail Evan. Later, the transcriber gets it correct. And she says that I'm going to write a book about her. Well, I didn't read this interview till after she was dead. And I had thought that Patricia Burnham was going to write the book. And instead, she ran into various health issues and couldn't do it, but she was able to contribute an essay to the book that I did. And so it's as if Teresa knew, well, she did know well before I did that I would do this project. And I was already doing it when I found out that she knew I was going to do it. So she had great intuition, which brings me to this painting, which another of her great patrons, Walter Meninin, has given to a public collection of a university in Gloucester on the north shore of Massachusetts. And it's called Lilies of the Field, from 1915. And Teresa told Walter Meninin, another one of her collectors and patrons, that she was representing prostitutes. And the lilies of the field, of course, refers to the Bible, to Matthew 6:28. And why not take thought for clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Now, how I know that how I can verify that these are prostitutes Teresa was depicting. And she had a model from Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven, who had fallen on hard times, and whom Marcel Duchamp sent to knock on Teresa's door to see if she needed a model, because he'd seen her work, her figurative work, on view in New York. possibly at the McDowell Club or in one of the other salons that she exhibited in. So, looking at the detail of the woman with the parrot, who is probably the Baroness Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven, I'm comparing it, actually we have to go back, but the women with the big hat before her maker's inner judge in John Sloane's etching, that we know is how prostitutes dressed. And so Teresa's showing them in the same, wearing the same, what were considered garishly large hats. Not the hats that Teresa's sister-in-laws were making for proper ladies. This would be sort of over-the-top clothing of its day. Teresa lived with her parents, but she got her own professional art studio on 55th Street between 6th and 7th Avenues in New York after she studied with William Merritt Chase. And there, she was on the top floor, and that's where it's called the Holbein Studio, and that became the name of this still life that she painted. You see her exotic slippers, maybe for a model to wear. You see the stove that heats the studio with its large skylights above. And this is the studio where an artist, William Meyerowitz, knocking on doors to collect work for a group show that he was doing, a benefit, was looking for T. Bernstein, thinking he was a man, only to have cute Teresa answer the door. And it must have been love at first sight. So this is the moment when she meets William and she's painting Polish Church Easter Morning, which we said is now in the National Gallery. And that's William Meyerowitz around the time she meets him. And as I said, he was the cantor in synagogues, he was singing in churches, but on Cape Ann in Gloucester. And he was also an extra in the chorus of the Metropolitan Opera. And he used to take Teresa, he could get free tickets and take her to the Metropolitan Opera. But here's what she was painting also. Notice that the crowd in Teresa's elevated railroad train, the elevated car, is pretty crowded in 1916. She loved the crowds, but look what happens in Edward Hopper's depiction in an etching of the same L train. And Hopper is a painter of isolated couples, isolated figures. He's a favorite painter of loneliness. And he and Teresa exhibited together. They knew each other. And Teresa knew his wife, later wife. He didn't marry till 24, 5 years after she married William. But Josephine Versteel Nivison Hopper. And I'm sure Teresa did not approve of the way Edward treated his wife, very different than the respect she got from William Meyerowitz. So there's no evidence of any of the squabbles that the Hoppers had at the Bernstein-Meyerowitz home. Nor are there any of the Bernstein crowds in Edward's paintings after, say, 1912. He really gives them up.